And what I truly believe, Sandi, is Calder set up a series of events to snap me out of this because I couldn't get out of the grief. And to this day, I'll say, at the right time, a reading with a medium is the most healing modality for anyone in deep grief because it does create hope and it sheds a light on something bigger than what you're in at the moment.
Carla Kaufman Sloan, I am so delighted to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to meet you.
Well, I've heard about you from Cheryl Page, who is a friend and a guest on the podcast, who I have great respect for. And your story is one of such torrential grief to this blossoming of transformation that is so hopeful for so many people. And that's the reason I wanted you on here, is because you went from not knowing any of this metaphysical stuff, and then turning into something. So what I did want to say this one quote that hit me right through my heart. You said, "When the grief was new, I wore it like cement shoes." Now, Carla, I have to let you know, my eyes keep welling up while I'm doing this conversation, even just starting the conversation with you. And so we're just going to go with that. But it's your story is so important for people to know there's hope and connection. I'm a huge believer, and I know that to be true. So, Carla, will you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I know Cheryl Page also raved about you. And I am a student of Suzanne Giesemann. So, of course, I listened to her podcast or your conversation with her as well. She is an inspiration as well. So I'm going to tell you, I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, which was like the party city, right? So I was always having fun. Like from a young age, I was just all about fun. I went to summer camp with all my little Jewish friends from the 4 surrounding states because you had to pool everyone together down there in the South. And that was always fun. And I just continued that throughout my life. I moved to New York, I moved to LA, and I started working in the entertainment industry. And so for me, that was also just about fun and games. Like I had a lot of luck with different jobs. I worked on Judge Judy, which was a completely different experience than working on game shows, but I eventually worked on game shows. And along the way, like Judge Judy, while I was there, got nominated for Emmy. So I got an Emmy nomination as a producer. And then I went on to work on a game show where we won an Emmy. So I was just kind of living this blessed life, unbeknownst to me, and having the time of my life, and not really interested in a relationship per se until I met my husband. I guess that's how it goes. You meet the one. And on my very first date with him, I found myself looking at him and like doing a checklist in my head. Okay, those eyes would look good on my children. Those lips would look good on my children. Like thoughts I had never had. I was not about kids. I wanted to be a career woman. But you know what they say, our best laid plans often turn into a completely different story. So we did fall in love. We got married. We had a fun wedding in New Orleans. And then he said to me, I want to move to Miami. We were living in Los Angeles. I had a good job, but after 5 years, my show that I had been on was wrapping, and he was changing his position. He's like, this is the perfect time. And at the time, I mean, this is like a joke amongst people, but I was like, only old people move to Miami. We weren't old yet. And so I was like, well, I figured I'll try it. I'm married. I guess marriage is about compromise. But I truly thought we would be there for a year and go back to Los Angeles. But that's not how it worked out. So we stayed in Miami and we ended up starting our own production company. And before we had children, I had this great plan to get a dog to see if my husband could handle it. I was like, if we get a dog, we'll be able to figure out if we're going to be able to manage this. So he was very against it and very, as I expected he would be. And then, as I learned throughout our entire relationship, within a week, he was obsessed with the dog, loved the dog. I had this pink crazy case I would carry the dog around in. He started carrying that around, this big pink case. And it was just so sweet. So we did have kids. I got pregnant. I was very, I'm going to say I was very old, but I was like 39 when I got pregnant with Calder. And shortly after, Caleb followed 2 years later. So we were living a hectic life. We had 2 little ones. We were running a business, and it was just crazy. And then, as you know, one day we had this conversation. We had been running and gunning and, baby everything. Our house was an explosion of toys. And my husband said, our friend is having a birthday party, and I really think we should go and do something as adults. And I really struggled with that, even though Calder was 7 at the time and Caleb was 5. So 7 days after Calder's 7th birthday, if anyone's a numerologist out there, we went to this birthday party, and that's where we got the phone call that no parent wants to ever receive.
Yes. So that's where your giant transformation begins. Yeah. And all of us will feel this with you. Can you share what happened on that fated day?
Yes. So it's interesting, Sandi, because people really don't, grief. People don't want to talk about grief, but it's almost like when a child dies, it's such an interesting level of grief because nobody, and we certainly didn't expect it, and they don't want to, I don't know, you don't want to be around it. So it was very much like this isolating experience. But on the day of the accident, we got the phone call at our friend's birthday party, and we were down on South Beach, and it was Gay Pride, so there was a parade going on. And so we couldn't get out of there. We were trying our hardest to get out of there. It became like a race, and just every obstacle was in our way. And then we finally made it out of there, and as we were driving home, we got a call that we needed to change directions and go to the hospital. So I actually, because I'm a producer, I think also I was just disassociating from my body. I called a neighbor and I said, she happened to be home, and I was like, here's what's going on. There was an accident in my house. Go over there and see what's actually happening because I need someone on the inside. And she was also a producer for the news. So she went over there and she was like, you're in a fevered frenzy of shock. And I just said to her, is he dead? And she said, he's dead.
Can you explain, Carla, what happened, how that happened?
Oh, yeah. So we have a swimming pool, like everybody in South Florida, pretty much, like because of the heat and the humidity. And my son was an amazing swimmer. Like we got them swimming lessons when they were 2 because that's just what you do in this world. And so he had done what he always does. He dove into the pool. His thing was dive into the pool, swim to one end without taking a breath, and swim back. Touch the light at the end of the pool. And so he did exactly that day. And unbeknownst to anyone, the pool was electrified because something had gone on with the light that no one understood. And when he touched the light, it was such a violent volt of electricity, it threw him out of the pool. So it was, I mean, from everything I know and believe, I believe it was instantaneous, even though everybody tried to reverse it. We had a neighbor who came over, tried to give him CPR, but there was so much electricity running through Calder's body, he couldn't hold on down. So he was like, and we see him periodically, and I'm always like so grateful to him and hug him. But yeah, that affected him as well. It was just this terrible experience. And our younger son, Caleb, was home during this whole thing. So he witnessed it. So thanks to my neighbor, she was able to get him out of there, my younger son out of there. By then, the ambulance had come to take Calder to the hospital, which, of course, they tried to do something, but nothing could be done at that point, which is horrific.
I think all of us listening to this story are we can't even imagine it. And grief is such an interesting thing. There's no time limit on when it's over. People think, oh, it's been 6 months, I should be okay. Well, no, there's no time limit. I learned that from Lisa Kefauver, one of my guests, who is an expert on grief. And it also is fascinating to me that Sweet Calder it sounds like he was electrified. And I think of Suzanne Giesemann and her daughter-in-law, who was struck by lightning, and then Wolf's Message, who was struck by lightning. There's something about that connection. And all three of these people who have now transitioned to the other side are great communicators on this side. So can you take us now to grieving parents, a grieving family, to how you were able to transition a little bit from that? Because I truly, I'm in this metaphysical world. I know all this, but when you're struck with that, everything goes out the door.
Right.
And I'm in this world, and you were not in that world, but then you get this understanding and these signs. And so if you can share that with us.
Absolutely. So it's interesting you bring that up, because I also thought the same thing about Suzanne and Wolf. And I was like, oh, because we talk about the electromagnetic field, right? Which is different than electricity, but it's all connected. And I do feel like there is some connection there, even though I haven't been gifted with the knowledge of what that is, that all three of those children were taken that way. But yeah, so I also recently, David Kessler he's a grief expert also, and he wrote a article about prolonged grief and how the grieving, like the therapists and psychologists have started to call this prolonged grief when you get a year, technically, even though grief is exactly as you said. It's a personal journey. I always say to people, you can't beat yourself up. So I was lost. I was seeing a professional at the time. She recommended medication. I was also I was like adding liquor to that because the medication didn't touch it enough for my comfort level, which I wasn't thinking rationally. But, and I remember thinking I was never going to stop feeling this pain. And it wasn't until my husband had a reading with a medium named AJ Barrera over the telephone, because he happened to we happened at the time to have a development executive who had worked with AJ, and he said, he saw Chris was back at the office, but obviously still in shock and pain. And he said, if you're interested in this, I can set up a reading. And my husband was like, what is that? Yeah. Like, that's how far, even though I had seen TV shows, I had watched Medium with Patricia Arquette, John Edward had a show out at the time. But we just weren't in that world, like you said. So that was our first experience with a medium. And he recorded the reading. And Chris didn't really tell me about it until days later, but he came home one day and I was just standing in the kitchen crying, like you do. Of course. And he said, so I have something to tell you. It was very ominous. And I thought, oh, what else could happen? Like, it didn't, whatever. Okay, what? Are you leaving me? That's okay. I understand. Like, it was just like, who knows? But he said, I had a reading with a medium, and I think you should listen to it. And what I truly believe, Sandi, is Calder set up a series of events to snap me out of this because I couldn't get out of the grief. And to this day, I'll say, at the right time, a reading with a medium is the most healing modality for anyone in deep grief because it does create hope and it sheds a light on something bigger than what you're in at the moment.
And an evidentiary medium, one who gives you evidence, like Suzanne Giesemann. I can't think of anything more hopeful from that, because if they know things that only you or your husband would know, of course Calder's around. And then it's interesting, one of my guests was Thomas Campbell, who is a physicist, studies the science of consciousness. He says, you cannot believe a truth until you experience it. So people could tell you over and over, oh, I had this, a friend of mine talk to their mother, and you go, well, that's interesting, but there's no way you can possibly believe it until you experience it. So can you share with us where that then took you, this evidentiary medium took you?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because everyone kind of has a different style, and he has a very much, I don't know, I always think of him as rock and roll. Like, Suzanne's very, she's got a method and she's very evidential, but at the same time, this guy AJ had he just got the information and gave it as he got it, and it was, like you said, things that no one knew at the time, and that I have included in my book. But he said at the end of the reading, my husband said to him, I think my wife would benefit from this. Can she have a reading also? And AJ said, well, why don't you just play this for her? Because he was probably thinking all the information's there, and he's booked solid, I'm sure, for years. And then also, you never know. You don't want it to come from someone else. You want the person who's going to get the reading to contact you as a medium, because otherwise you don't know if they really believe. It could end up in a different way. Anyway, so I took that in my medicated world as a challenge. Yeah. And I sought him out, and I went undercover to discover if he really was a medium. Like, I was like, okay, I could do this for work. I could do this for this. And basically, the story unfolds that, of course, I got there, and it was a weekend of mediumship, which I didn't even know what that meant. There were people there studying to be mediums, of course, I would become a medium later, but I had no idea what that meant. And I thought, oh, there's going to be all these people trying to trick people out of money, or maybe this isn't true. And I had that very TV producer, like news hat on. And I was met with the most warm and loving group of people. But I didn't get a reading from Calder it was a 3-day event. And it wasn't until the 3rd day, probably because of my reaction, because, they know what's going to happen on the other side.
Yeah.
So on the 3rd day, they were wrapping up the event and they said, all right, and so if everybody will get up now, we're going to move into the next room. Oh, and AJ was in the front of the room and he said, wait a minute. There's one more spirit coming through, and I know it's a young boy because he's pulling on my pant leg. So, of course, I froze. And then AJ said, this child is giving me the name, and he said my son's Hebrew name, which the only place that appears is on Calder's gravestone, which was not laid at the time. So when he said that name, I just immediately felt this rush of energy inside me, and he gave me, he gave me an evidential reading with information that we hadn't gotten in the other reading. And then I broke down like you would not believe. Like, if you talking to me today, it probably seems like I wouldn't be that emotional. But of course, as a mother who's lost a child, and I was grasping at straws when this actually came true that I got the reading. I disrupted the entire weekend. I thought these people, if they hadn't been so loving and nice, I would have been like, she needs to get out of here. Like, she's hysterical. But instead, they all came around me, and I got reading after reading after reading from every single person there. It was so heart affirming and life changing. Wow. I know.
You went in as, wasn't your name Melanie?
Yes. I went in Undercover as Melanie from Miami. It was also my name when I worked at a TV show where I had to talk to people who were incarcerated. I realized I needed to change my name because I got a couple of marriage proposals that I wasn't ready for. So I was like, oh, I should use a different name. So it worked for me then, and I figured I'll keep that name. So if you ever meet someone named Melanie, you better double check.
Exactly. TV producer all the way. So after that, what happened that because you and your husband both, you weren't really believers in metaphysics, or it probably wasn't even part of your world. Or right. Maybe it was, maybe in television it was, but it was so removed. Those people were, just kind of charlatans or something.
Right.
So now you're in it and you have proof that this is real.
Yes.
What was your next step?
So it was interesting because, again, I was led on this amazing journey. So we had another person who worked for us. This is jumping ahead like a year. And he had produced a TV show for TLC called Angels Among Us with this medium, Rosie Shapiro. And she came to town, and this is why I have this as my background now, because she came and Calder came through to her right away, but Tim didn't want to tell me because I was still in that, I would have crying jags on the regular, and he didn't want to be the one to cause that, even though I will tell you now, as someone who's gone through grief, let people cry. Like, it's okay. You just have to bear witness to that, and you're not gonna, and it's better for people to get it out of them. Anyway, so Rosie came to town, and we went to lunch, and we had this amazing experience. Now, she didn't know who the little boy was who came through because Tim had kept her in the dark. So we get to lunch, and she's not one of those mediums who gives readings like out in public. You usually have to be with her in her space. But she said that the minute we sat down, first my grandmother stepped in behind me and basically was like, you better not do anything to upset my granddaughter. Like, she's a strong woman. And then Calder came, and right there at lunch, she gave me this reading, and she said, can you pull that purple pouch out of your purse? Calder wants me to look in it. And we were like, how does she know I have a purple pouch in my purse? And sure enough, I pulled it out, and I had kept things in there. I'd become like, not metaphysical, but since I had been involved in that mediumship thing, I was paying attention to things. So I found a penny, I found a feather. And so I kept them in this little bag with a picture of Calder. And she opened it. And my friend Tim, who had produced that show, was still floored. He said, "What? You didn't tell me you had this in your purse?" I was like, I mean, why would I tell you that? And as she unzipped it, the feather floated out of the little bag and landed on her nose. And we started laughing. I went from tears to laughter. And I feel like those are the best moments, when it can be broken with that laughter. And Calder was so funny. And he still is so funny. He does things all the time like that are hilarious.
What I love about all this is, I was talking to a friend about this yesterday who's a medium psychic, brilliant one. And I said, I never lose the wonder and the awe of the signs. I just never do. I don't ever want to get to the point where I go, oh, look at my dad is, oh, he's showing me another sign. Oh, look at that. Every time, Carla, I just go, wow.
Me too.
Because it's magic, and we must believe in magic. Children believe in magic. They know magic. That children, when they're young, they really are the ones that are the antennae for all this stuff. They see it all. They feel it all. Animals are the same way. They can see things that we don't physically see, but are just as real. And I often say that side feels more real to me than what we are in right now. This is like a holding pattern to learn. We're learning.
Right, we're in school.
We're in school.
I didn't pick this class.
I know, exactly. Did I really choose this? But and there's so many beautiful things on this side too, being, living on this planet as a human. But this is what I love, are these stories, and they give people hope. And I especially love it when it's somebody like you that came from absolute non-believer in this kind of stuff, in metaphysical things, to now where you're practicing a very well-renowned medium. Okay, if somebody told you this 15 years ago, Carla, you're going to say, you are on drugs right now.
I know. Some days I still don't believe it. Yeah. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. It's so awesome you said that about the awe and wonder, because really, when you get to the place where you do recognize the signs, and I feel like people ask me that all the time. Like, if you're not sure, you're like, but is that a sign? Is this a sign? And you have to, it's almost like a new language that you have to learn. So I'm going to share a sign I got with you yesterday.
Oh, great.
So I was thinking about our podcast. It's only the middle of the week, but it's been a crazy week for me. A lot of things have been happening. And I do talk to Calder a lot, but I was just distracted by everything. And I went and got the mail, and I'm just like, everything's junk mail, and I'm just throwing it in the garbage, throwing it in the garbage, throwing it in the garbage. And then I pick up a magazine. I'm like, who gets magazines anymore? I didn't even know I got magazines. And I look at the magazine, and on the cover of the magazine, it says, Calder is alive and well and living in Philadelphia. But I was like, Calder is alive and well. That's amazing.
And there you go. This is what I love to share with people, is that it's on the side of the truck that drives by. it's on the license plate. And oftentimes if we ask for signs, and I do believe, I'm a real believer in asking for signs, but they're not going to come in the way you think. Like you say, I wanted a sign of a hot air balloon, which felt pretty impossible, at the time. I think it was winter. We don't have hot air balloons outside. So I threw that one out there. I'm watching this thing on Instagram, Carla, and it's in the desert in the Middle East, and there are dozens of hot air balloons and people on camels below. And I'm going, are you kidding me? This is the magic. So we can never get stuck in this is the way it has to be, because it's not going to come in that way. So be very, very open-minded. I'm sure you find that to be true.
I do find that to be true, because one of my favorite signs from Calder is a rainbow. So to get a rainbow, and I do, by the way, get hundreds of rainbows, including this past week. But one day I was like, there's no way that this is the rainbow weather, but I really want a rainbow Calder. If you can make that happen today, I don't know. I just am feeling like I could use that lift. And wouldn't you know it, within 2 hours, one of my girlfriends texted me a joke about a rainbow. And I wish I could remember it, but I can't. But it was like, okay, so as you're saying, it was an unexpected way, but I got it. I was like, okay, thank you. And and it just adds a layer to your life of joy and, like you say, wonder. And I have started asking for specific signs over the years. In fact, I started a Substack recently to put stories up about different experiences. And one of the experiences I had was I was having a frustrating human day where everything was going wrong. I had to go to the periodontist. They were going to dig in my mouth. I was like, oh, the book was finished, but I didn't know what to do then. And I was like, oh, how do you get an agent? And now, oh, should I even do this? Why am I doing like a petulant child myself? And I'm like, okay, everybody, if I'm supposed to put this book out into the world, I want $100 bill on the sidewalk in front of me. And then I went into the doctor's office and had that experience. And when I came back out, there was a single penny on the sidewalk. And I started laughing because I thought, this is not what I asked for, but I get it. Like, this is funny. And I have this practice where I look up the date of the penny on angel numbers, and then it said, everything is being put into place behind the scenes, but you have to have patience.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, I am laughing. Thank you. At least that lifted my spirits. I forgot about the $100 bill. I went about my business. And a week later, I had to go back to the same shopping area to pick up these glasses, actually. And I'm all by myself on the sidewalk, and I look down, and there's a $100 bill on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's the way it works. And
right?
That's the way it works. And and the word patience and trust, those words come up a lot for me, that even with the podcast, because it was completely guided through me. Everything, the title, everything was guided through me. I know the team is there. I know they're working behind the scenes. Much easier for me to read other people than myself. Much easier. And, but patience is the word that keeps coming up. Like, be patient, my child, be patient, because it's all happening like little mice on wheels behind the scenes, making it all happen. But we do need to be patient, and we can't control it. That's the other thing that I found. Control it is kind of like a stop sign. So I like to share, please be patient and please just trust in the process, because you're going to get, I always call them breadcrumbs. You're going to get little breadcrumbs along the way and go, oh, there's one. How did you go, Carla, from this devastating loss to now feeling confident as a medium. And what did you do to become a medium?
Well, it's been a process, obviously. If you read the book Signs by Laura Lynn Jackson,
yes,
my son Calder and her son Caleb connected us. So during my reading that's in that book, this other woman's son came through named Caleb, and she said, there's a Caleb here. And because I didn't understand still, it was like a year after the AJ experience and the Rosie experience. She said, does the name Caleb mean something to you? And then she said, wait, don't answer me. And she said, oh, I'm getting that I know a Caleb on the other side, but your other son's name is Caleb. Calder's brother's name is Caleb. And I mean, that alone, I could have walked out. It was so incredible to me. And then at the end of this amazing reading, we were just talking as we were working on something together. And she said, hey, would you ever speak to this mom? It's, she's only a few months out. And of course, this was my path. I just didn't know it at the time. I said, of course, please put her in touch with me. If I could help someone not be where I was at that point or just be an heir. And so we have been friends ever since. Mm-hmm. Oh, and that reading happened on her son's birthday, I later found out. Well, it was wild. So since and she was the only one I could really talk to about the metaphysical world once the fire was ignited, and I wanted to talk about it all the time. I was like, wait, let me tell you this story. And she would call me, let me tell you this story. I got this sign, and my son was here, and I felt this. And so COVID happened, and she texted me, and she said, there's this woman, Suzanne Giesemann, on the Shift Network, and she's giving a class in mediumship. Because we had kind of been toying around with the idea. Because, of course, when you see it happen, you're like, could I do that? Mm-hmm. That was the most helpful thing. If I could deliver that for one parent, one person suffering, how cool would that be? She's like, let's take the class. So we signed up for the class during COVID, and of course it was amazing. And Suzanne seems like, she was a military person, as everyone knows, but she just seems like someone we would hang out with, right? Oh, you did hang out with her.
I did hang out. Went to a winery. Oh my God, we had so much fun. Her husband is very, very funny, Ty. Yeah, she's special in that her dichotomy of military and now one of the top 100 spiritual leaders in the world. Right. She's such an interesting combination.
And I feel like she kind of set the bar. She was teaching this class, and all during the class, things started happening. So from there, she talked about her mentor and her teacher, Mavis Patilla, who was still alive at that time. And then I was like, oh, I can take another class. And who knew you could develop your entire mediumship practice online, like in the beginning?
It's amazing. And who knew that every one of us has this ability? That's the thing that's really also important is I don't ever look at one person and go, oh, wow, they're the only ones that can do this, that they're the ones with the gift. And I have to go to that person. We all have it. Just some of us have a little bit more dust over it than others, but we came in as I guess said, paranormal is the normal, but we've just put a lot of dust over it and buried it. So you are slowly uncovering this beautiful side of being human. Oh, I love this, that you can be human, feel all the emotions, and yet still connect brilliantly to these golden beings on the other side. Oh,
and like you said,
it's delicious.
It is. And it never stops amazing me. I feel like that's why people become renowned or good mediums. Like, I've only been really in the world for 5 years of mediumship. And I started out as someone who knew nothing. So if you've been someone like Suzanne or Laura, who's been doing it for 40 years, or I might be aging her, she's probably not that old, but I was like, wow, it's just going to keep expanding. The more you feed it, the more it grows and opens. And I feel like also, so I also took David Kessler's grief educator program because you're basically becoming somewhat of a grief therapist.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to have the right words.
And grief is an interesting thing. I learned so much from Lisa Kefauver, but we have to be really careful when somebody's grieving, and the words that we say to them is, oh, at least he's in a better place. At least, they're just things you just don't say to a grieving person. Will you share with us a few things that are comforting to you as a grieving parent that would be comforting for people to say to you?
Oh, yes. I actually just listened to that episode, and she's awesome. And I also came from the world of comedy, and I think yes and is such a, I remember thinking that when I learned about improv, like this is a life tool. Mm-hmm. Yes, and which they teach kids now in grief. But so some things I will tell you that when people use my son's name, which now they do frequently because I'm so open about it, but in the beginning, you're so afraid of upsetting the grieving parent that you shy away from saying their name. Like you might remind them that their child died, which of course is all consuming in your brain all the time. So one of the first things that happened that I thought this woman is going to be a friend for life, and I barely knew her, is she texted me from carpool and she said, I just want you to know I was driving home 3 girls from Calder's class, and they were talking about who do you think the nicest boy is in first grade? You know, kids, who's the nicest? Or who's the... And she said they all said Calder. And she had the bravery to reach out to me when really everyone was afraid to. And so that's a long way of me saying your child's name is something that is comforting.
Oh, that's beautiful to know. I think for those on the other side that want to comfort the griever, we're just at a loss because the pain is so deep. But I think that makes so much sense. I just love it when somebody looks at me and says my name. It's an acknowledgement of seeing me. And right. I think that's so they're seeing Calder and they're acknowledging you and they're seeing you. I think that's really beautiful. Will you share with us the deer story, which just delighted me? Yes.
No, it's so amazing. And this is also in the book Signs, but I write about it in my book too from a different perspective because I still wasn't sure. I mean, I had these experiences. Laura gave me that amazing reading. And in the reading, she said, your son is saying he's going to send you a deer to have an experience with. And we both, I don't know if it was the first time she'd ever gotten that in a reading or what, but she was like, okay, that's interesting. And I thought, she goes, you're going on a trip? And I thought, we are going to England. Maybe they're deer in England. I don't know. And there were so many other things in that reading, I kind of forgot about it. But then I got home and I had forgotten we were going to the Keys that weekend. And we drive to the Keys from Miami. It's about a 3.5-hour drive. And we left late. And on the way down, it had gotten dark and I had dozed off. And my husband went, oh, look at that. And startled me awake. And I was like, look at what? He goes, I've been driving down here for 20 years. I've never seen that. There's 4 key deer on the side of the road. And I was like, what? oh no, I missed it. And I started to cry. And he was like, what happened? Because he didn't want to hear about this stuff at the time. So I hadn't even told him that there was possibility of a deer coming. And so the whole weekend I tortured myself that I had missed my moment with the deer. And we went about our weekend. I put it to the back burner. And when we were driving home, Chris stopped to go into this place called the No Name Pub, which is on Big Pine Key. And I sat in the car with Caleb, and he went inside. And as I was sitting there in the parking lot, I noticed the bushes kind of shimmying at the other end of the parking lot. And then a deer walked into the parking lot. Excuse me. And I thought, is this happening? There's a deer walking towards the car in this parking lot. And I got really excited. And at the time, I still carried a regular camera. So I got my camera out and I got out of the car as quietly as I could because I hear deer skittish. And I took a picture of it from far away, but it just kept walking straight towards me, like making a beeline towards me. And then I thought, this deer isn't scared. And then it walked around by these picnic tables, and I walked over to it, and I put my hand out, and I was kind of nervous because it's still a wild animal. I don't know if deer bite your fingers off, but it was so sweet and little, and I put my hand out, and as I was putting my hand out, Chris walked out of the bar, and he said, what's happening? Because I had told him the story by then, and the deer put its nose in my hand, and he managed to snap a picture right at that moment. And we just stood there in shock and awe that exactly what Calder had said was going to happen just happened. Like, I was having the moment with the deer. Chris came in just a little bit towards the end, managed to capture it on camera. And ever since then, I have been like, okay, this is really happening. You have to just learn as much as you can about how to keep this in your life.
They're very clever on the other side. They're just so clever bringing these signs to us. And also, I feel we need to keep our frequencies fairly high because they're a very, very high frequency. So to match us, if we're extremely down and depressed or angry, or it's harder because those frequencies are a bit lower. And somewhere we can just raise ourselves just for a moment in time so they can reach us. I think that's really important. I mean, I have found that to be true with myself. Can I ask, Carla, how did Chris and Caleb deal with the situation towards the beginning and then now?
Towards the beginning of the grief or the beginning of me?
The beginning of the grief and then what's happening now.
So, while Chris and I definitely were different grievers, I was very introspective and had kind of folded in on myself. Mm-hmm. And Chris was like, I'm getting back out there immediately. I'm making sure our company doesn't fold. I'm getting Calder's name all over everything in Miami, like a tree here, a memorial there. And he came to me and he said, let's start a foundation. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. And when we started talking about it, and I said, at the time Calder left his body, Caleb was only 5, not even 5. And I said, I think we should call it the Caleb and Calder Awesome Foundation, because we don't want Caleb to feel like he's not part of this. And we did, and we started that. And Caleb has been very, he grew up talking about his brother, but it doesn't, there's transitions. Just like as adults, we go through different transitions of grief. For a little kid, it was very hard for him to go from having a brother that he played with all the time, shared a room with, did everything with, to why do I not have a brother now? And I'll tell you, the hardest part was for a year. He kept asking me when he was coming back, when is Calder coming back? Because this is the longest game of hide and go seek I've ever played. And it was really hard. I do tell you, sometimes I have a random thought that Calder may have come to visit him a couple of times, and that's what confused him. Because he was like,
exactly
he's right there.
Exactly what I was just thinking. Yes.
But so finally, we got through that. I tried to keep everything normal for Caleb, but you become very, like, talk about helicopter parents. Like, forget it. I was very reticent to let Caleb out of my eyesight, which doesn't service the child, of course, because you want them to feel independent. And we're still a little bit like that, I must say. But Caleb became an amazing person, and he's 16 now. He's a singer and a performer. And I will say, one of the things I am proud about, in addition to our foundation, is we created a legacy fund at this place called Experience Camps, which is an amazing camp for children in grief. Children who've lost a sibling or a parent or someone in their nuclear family. And the camp is completely funded by donations, so the child can go there for an entire week. The parents then have that week to kind of put themselves back together or do whatever they need to do for themselves. And it's mind-blowing, the work that they do. But Caleb never went until this summer. And now he's a teenager, and the grief is shifted. It's not that he is grieving, but it does do certain things to your psyche where you think, oh, I'm a guy now, I shouldn't cry. Or, oh, I'm this person. Oh, people know about my brother being dead, so they're treating me differently. So this camp gives them a way to talk about all that without the guilt of, like, am I upsetting my parents, or am I bringing their grief back into focus? And so it's pretty amazing. So we have definitely put service high on the list in terms of the foundation, but I also feel like the mediumship is a way to serve people as well.
Absolutely. So when you decided this is what you're going to be doing now, is your husband fully supportive of that as well? And has he kind of bought into, yes, this is all very, very real?
I will tell you, the cutest thing is he will be the first person to be like, did you know Carla's a medium now?
Oh. I just love that, Carla. I love that. So my husband, he's very left brain, linear, and he knows that I have this podcast, Fear Unzipped. He is so proud, and he talks about it, and he tells his friends about it. I'm thinking, you're telling your friends about this? I don't know. But he's so proud, but he's very linear. And he kind of believes, but, not quite sure about it. But again, it has to happen to you.
Right.
For it to be your truth. And yeah.
And can I tell you the sweetest thing? So, yeah, I love it. My husband's the same way. But he is, like I said, so supportive. But so it really started to expand this year because I started to do living room gatherings where people would come over and I do readings for a group of people. And he is the first to say, like, afterwards, someone may tell him, I've been to a medium before. Like, I've been to a couple, and I've never gotten the reading I wanted to get until your wife read for me. And so it's such a blessing, that he feels comfortable receiving that information and that he's the one sharing it with me, because then it creates this whole togetherness that we are doing something for people, because it really is life-changing to know your loved ones are right with you.
Absolutely. The most powerful, like you said, I do think it's the most powerful thing that you can do. So when you are doing a reading, how does it come into you? How is the information coming into you?
When I do a reading, it's never the same, but I'm very clairsentient, I feel, which, by the way, I always joke that I came into the world as a marshmallow, and I always was upset that I was so emotional, so sensitive. Like, for a while when I was a child, I went selectively mute because it was just all too much for me. And I never knew what that meant until I became a medium. And it's actually a gift because you can feel what the communicator is trying to tell you. So I may get, if they want to talk about their passing, which they don't always do, I may get a fluttering in my chest or something that would indicate lung cancer, and then you get a knowing with it, because it could be a heart attack, but there's just different ways that different things happen. And I'll tell you the most fun, talk about wonder and awe. I do most of my readings in my little garage office here, and I will tell you, it's a little like, I have so many things in here, like feathers and books and all kinds of things, and they will draw my attention. Like Suzanne says, they will draw your attention to something. And I have this tiny little Ganesh on my desk, and I was giving a reading for a woman once, and my attention kept getting drawn to Ganesh, and I thought, she was of Indian heritage, and I thought, I'm not going to say this. She's going to think I'm racist or something, that I'm going to say Ganesh to her. And I said, I am going to tell you that your loved one keeps drawing my attention to Ganesh. And she went, and I thought, okay, that's usually a good sign that it meant something to her. She goes, that was my loved one's name. And I thought, that is a lesson for me. Don't hold back because you're worried about being embarrassed or saying the wrong thing. Obviously, we're in this work because we know that we're all connected by love in the higher realm. And that was the most healing thing for her. Like, it sealed the information I had given her before that. So she knew.
And we want to know 100% that this is accurate. Yes, Suzanne says the spirit will snag you. They just kind of, and it happens all the time, and it's fascinating. Carla, we're coming to the close here, which is so hard to even imagine. Is there something else that you'd like to share about Calder, or an experience that happened that was, I know that there have been so many that are so profound, or with a person has come to you?
I'm going to tell you a really cute story that happened. So Calder, there's so many with Calder. This is why I wrote a book, because with Calder, there's a book full of experiences, and with other people too. But when I was in the early grief, about a year and a half after Calder died, our dog, Daisy, that we had had since before Calder was born, was so sick and needed to be put down, or I don't know what they call it, taken to the doctor. And I wasn't fighting it with all of my being. I was doing the wrong thing, Sandi. I was giving her medicine. I was giving her injections. She would bark and black out and fall over, and I'd bring her back to life. Like, I was like, you're not dying. So we took her, we helped her go to the other side, and it was very peaceful, and they're so professional when you do that. And my husband had to leave town the next day, so I was sitting in bed with our other dog, Charlie, and I hear on the tile floor these little toenails. And I'm like, I have no one to say, do you hear that? But Charlie gets up and walks to the end of the bed and watches as if Daisy's walking through, goes up the doggy stairs, and he moves out of her place in my bed as if she just sat down next to me. And that's the way we spent the rest of the night. And I knew she was coming to make sure I knew it was okay. Like, she was good. But to top that off, the next day, Rosie called me. She goes, I just had this dream about Calder came to me. He hasn't come to me in years. And he was holding a dog in a field of daisies. Does that mean something to you? And I thought, yeah, how lucky am I?
And that's the way it works, folks. That's amazing. That's a great story. When our George left this world, I kept seeing shadows of him running around the corner, and both our kids also saw it. So they're never gone. The moral of this story is our loved ones are always with us. Our guides are always with us. And it's a matter of believing, experiencing, and being patient. I believe all of that. Oh my gosh, Carla, this has been an incredible conversation. I do have questions that I ask everybody. So can I ask you these questions?
Sure.
Okay, so the first one is, what is your number one go-to strategy when you're in a bit of mental distress?
My number one go-to strategy is so not metaphysical, Sandi.
It's okay.
I will put on, this is so funny. So I'll put on an episode of Friends on my phone and put on my headset, and I'll just like let my body relax and be like, okay, this is familiar, this is easy, this is fun. And it's almost like, I mean, I know a lot of people meditate, but that is like one of my go-to things.
I think it's perfect. I just heard, we as a family, we watch the same shows over and over and over again, the same movies over and over and over again. And I just heard a psychologist say the reason people do that is because it's familiar and it's safe. So they feel it's like comfort food. And I was wondering, why do we watch how we watch this movie 100 times? Like if it's funny or even if it's a drama or a crime. Anyway, that's I love that idea. What's one of the best pieces of advice that you've been given professionally or personally?
Well, one of the best pieces of advice, such a good question, is one of my mentors told me a long time ago. She said, you have to stop looking for everything outside of yourself and just know it's all in you. And really, when you do meditate, when you go to that quiet place, ask the questions and the answers will come from within you. I felt like that was good advice.
I think that's excellent advice because we often go externally to get answers, or that person knows better, or yeah, I think that's wonderful advice. What does a successful life look like to you?
A successful life looks like I'm at a huge book fair signing copies of my book, talking to parents, letting them know that there is life coming back for them and that they shouldn't ever feel guilty if they can't figure out how to get there right away, that they will.
Yeah, it's you do it in your time, right? It's not by anybody else's. Okay, complete the sentence. In the past I was, and now I am.
In the past I was clueless, and now I'm constantly learning.
Oh, and aren't we all? Yeah. And my thing is, stay curious. If you're not curious, then what's the point of any of this? It's another quote that I wrote down from you is, you said, connecting to the world beyond can bring great healing and allow us to let go of survivor's guilt. move through the anger of sudden loss, and feel less alone as we navigate the relentless riptides of grief. I think that's important to navigate survivor's guilt, because I think we all feel guilty that we survived, especially when you're a parent, that you survived your child, which seems impossible. So
that's true. Thank you for reading that.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited for your book to come out. It's called Everywhere, which is one of the best titles I've ever heard for a book like this. I love it. Carla, where can people find you?
I have a website, carlasloan.net. I don't know why it's .net, but it is. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and I'm now on TikTok, where I have 2 videos.
Yay! I haven't gone there yet. Anyway, good for you. Also, you mentioned this behind you, this painting, but didn't say what this was. Can you share that?
Gosh, talk about losing my train of thought. So I started to talk about Rosie and the lunch and the feather, and we were laughing. And she said at the end of the lunch, we still hadn't sold our house that we had been out of, because that's where the accident happened. And but I had cleaned it all out. And she goes, I need to go to your house. And I said, my house? And she goes, well, the house where Calder was. And so we went to the house and we talked about the fact that I didn't know if it was ever going to sell. And she started walking through the house like she knew where she was going. And she walked right into the playroom. And she goes, there's something in here. There was nothing in there. There was no furniture, nothing. And we shut the door to the playroom. Mm. And on the back of the door was this finger painting that the boys and I had all done together. Like, we used to paint all the time, and it's got Calder's handprint. It's got numbers on it. And she was like, yeah, you need to take that. It was left behind. He's telling you that. And
I have chills.
So now beautiful. I put it up as my background.
It's wonderful. Oh, Carla, thank you so much for sharing your story, for being just this beautiful, bright light in times of, we're all struggling right now a little bit. The energies are pretty intense. We're all kind of upside down. And it's just so helpful to know that our loved ones are always with us, and little winks, and they have such an incredible sense of humor. Calder certainly does.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm sending you so much love, Carla. Thank you for being here. Mwah.
Thank you.
Lots of love.
Lots of love.